Libertarian Counterpoint. I am James. Just with me today is Mr. John Cameron. John, there's a lot of talk about censorship and the meaning of it and how it manifests itself. But today we're going to talk about NPR. They suspended their senior editor, Uri Berliner. Berliner? Is that how I'm saying that correctly? Berliner. After his essay, after he wrote an essay pointing out how over the last 25 years, the NPR has moved from just being a liberal outlet, right? Everybody knew they were a little left of center, but now they've just gone full-bore activist left. And he pointed that out in a well-written column, and then they suspended him for it to kind of prove his point. I mean, if you can't just prove your point, that you can't take even the slightest criticism from someone who actually loved him. He spent 25 years at NPR. He loves this place. He was speaking from a place of love, and they still suspended him. It's almost unbelievable, John, except these days it's easily believable.
Nothing's unbelievable. Well, I was going to do a joke and pretend as if maybe you can join me in it. We'll pretend like we're talking, but nobody can hear. Because I'm actually shocked that they haven't figured out a way to censor this show. But what's interesting about Mr. Berliner is he's, I think, a Pulitzer Prize winning person. He's won, like, I think, a couple of Grammys for his work. Grammys are for TV, right?
Yeah.
And he's well respected. He's a business writer, if I understand. So you pretty much can't really, I mean, very few liberal people, for some reason, can read a balance sheet or income statement unless they're like internet billionaires, and then they're so distorted from reality. But it gets worse because the person in charge of NPR now has, and I think this is what he was saying, that the head of the organization is basically just so far out there that they're disconnected from everybody except for the extreme left. And they only focus on issues that matter to those at the top of the elite food chain on the extreme left: trans, hardcore environmental. I mean, just like crazy environmental stuff.
Well, it's the coastal elite colleges. It's those 1% of the 1% that actually, you know, those hard left 1% who've gone to the colleges, they've gone to these universities, you know,
which their rich Republican grandfathers
paid
ended
for,
up giving the money to their kids, who didn't impress upon them how it was earned, and now they're thinking they can do no harm. They're in strong support, crazy strong support of Hamas, just on and on and on. Every far left cutting edge thing that only the elites, that 1% of 1% actually believe, is what they're doing, and he just pointed it out. And the person who's now in charge of NPR talked about, she did a TED Talk saying that, you know, yes, journalism, I believe I'm right in who it was, journalism's about the truth, but sometimes there are things more important than the truth. And those were, with all of the hate going on now, you know, and the left and right going after each other, that sometimes doing things to tone that down is actually more important than telling the truth, based in almost those exact words. And I thought, NPR is a news organization. Now, they put on some wonderful shows that I don't know if you could call news, and a lot of their interviews aren't really news because they have people who believe something interviewing people who believe the same thing constantly, and it's more like a political platform. But it's really, really, really bad. But there's Science Friday and stuff like that, wonderful shows. And there are an awful lot of people now just flat out calling to defund NPR. Something like 30% of their money comes from the government. And I certainly don't want my tax dollars supporting either left or right-wing propaganda. I mean, the U.S. government wouldn't support Epoch Times. Is it Epoch Times or Epoch Times? I can never figure out how to pronounce it. So why are we supporting basically somebody who's an organization that's a propaganda piece, which is even further to the left than they are to the right, with tax dollars? So it's crazy, and I think there is some backlash going on now over this.
Yeah, well, there's been backlash to NPR the way the whole public radio sphere is actually kind of manifests itself. I have the privilege, I suppose, of working in the public media sphere, and those who represent the wide group are clearly left leaning, right? It will be nice, but a lot of those who they represent are not.
Yeah.
And so it's when you have people who are allegedly there to represent a group of people who they choose not to represent, and then you say, well, maybe the truth isn't, you're talking about how
it isn't the most important
isn't the most important thing. You're wondering why people are no longer trust these organizations.
Well, because you just said that we don't need to tell the truth.
Yeah, you're telling people that you're not trustworthy, and that's there's consequences to that.
There are consequences to everything, and many times those consequences aren't what you expect them to be. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, but sometimes it doesn't hit for years, and sometimes it hits in a place that you don't expect.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know that the reaction that happened is the reaction, what it actually happened from, and so it's hard. It's difficult.
Well, and it's happened. It is happening so consistently that I'm surprised that I guess the people who own, like the private news organizations, privately owned, are more concerned with putting out propaganda than with and watching their viewership and the clicks and everything shrink and shrink and shrink than actually doing what they're supposed to do, which is making profits for their shareholders. There's literally half of the country who believes just the opposite of what they believe and won't buy a newspaper, won't watch CNN, won't watch MSNBC, won't watch many of the programs that are on because they're basically woke propaganda. And I'm wondering how they can just decide as a corporate entity and their major goal is to maximize shareholder well-being, can just write off half of their potential audience, but they're doing it. And in this case, I guess they can because they rely on donations from people who believe exactly as they do.
Yeah, the upper 1% of the 1%.
And the government to take care of the other hole in it.
Yeah. So we're talking about consequences to actions. California has been considering a bill that would require Google and other search engines to pay news gathering organizations every time one of their links sends them to their site. So now not only do they want Google to provide this service, so you get access to Google's audience. Now they want Google to pay for the privilege of this, and not by market forces. California legislature wants to force this on us. And so what Google has done is they're blocking links to California websites, to California news sites. We're going to test and see how our audience reacts to it.
27 of them, I think.
I don't remember the exact number, but
so that means 28 people are actually not being able to see those. That was my joke about how few people read
the news. Well, that's the thing. The only news that's happening is local news, and this is actually going to negatively impact local news because they won't be able to get their news stories out. And
let's see. Yeah, I actually might. I'm of two minds on this one, because if I were to cut an article out of, let's say, a B reporter wrote a nice piece, and if I were to take that piece and put it on my own website or put it in a book, I would basically be using trademarked, copyrighted material, and I would have to either pay them for it or get their permission to use it. But if you do it on a website, you don't have to.
Well, so, it's because they're actually sending them to your website.
Well, but they're sending them to your website with their ads, so it's not your advertising revenue.
Well, but this is even the other one. They're actually paying. If you click on the first 10 links of Google, those are all paid advertisements. So they're actually paying. This is where it gets crazy. So if someone clicks on one of those paid ads, these news places pay to put their ads up on the top to get higher search results. Then, right? So then you click on that. So now Google has to pay some of that money back to the people who paid for the ad. And then when these people go to the websites and they have Google's AdSense on there, they're going to actually end up having to pay Google again for all the viewers who came to their site. This is stupid. It's just, We're creating an economic mess for no reason. Well, except
This
because
ain't the only one.
well, we know the reason is because we've got Democrats in the California under the dome down the street here who are trying to save their left-leaning newspapers, and so they're going to use whatever tools they can. You know, you can't use tax money directly, not yet, but they're going to do it in a backhanded way.
Yeah.
It's a backhanded tax is essentially what it is.
Well, and you know, your argument makes sense. Still, I don't. I mean, it'd be really easy to just have the just get rid of all of that. Put it market forces. Just say that the same rules apply if you bring up the article, then bring up the newspaper's ads with it.
Well, you see, a lot of these places I get from MSN News, and actually MSN pays, you know, the original news source to post their ads on, to post their news stories on MSN. Yeah. And so they are getting compensated. There already is a market force to do this. You just have to actually have quality content that none of these places actually want to have. You don't want to have quality content where someplace like Microsoft or whatever will pay them. Say, yeah, I'll pay you to put your article on my website. They already have, the market already exists for that. It's just, there's not enough quality content. And so now they want to force us to, if you want to know what that link says, that link with, oh, what's the phrase I'm working, that clickbait link, you want to know what the actual story is, you're going to have to, Google's going to have to pay 10 cents or whatever it is. It's silly, because Google's just going to get that money from you someplace else. You're just going to see more ads on YouTube. You're just going to see more ads in Google. It's just going to make an even worse experience. Of course, I don't know why anybody's using Google search anyway. So
I do because it's easy, but I don't. Yeah, if I want an objective answer, I use DuckDuckGo. You know, but if I want to be, if it's something like, you know, what's the population of, I just use Google because it's easy. But you know, it took me about a half hour to get a crime statistic the other day off of Google, and I think when I went to DuckDuckGo and asked the same question, it took me about a minute and a half. It took me to the website that had exactly what I wanted, but the way I phrased the question, Google didn't want me to ask that question, so it would never send me where I wanted to go.
Yeah, it's the censorship, it's the underhanded censorship. And actually Richard has Richard from the Fields.
Richard Fields?
Richard Fields, God, I cannot talk today, has something to say about social media censorship. So let's see what Richard's got.
I'm eager to hear it.
Oh, I hear in my ear there's a little bit of issue with Richard's thing. So we're going to move on a minute as we talk about censorship. A former CBS reporter says that the network, as she was laid off, the network seized her confidential files on a case she had been working on, and so now she went to a congressional committee to I guess, expose as a whistleblower. Let's be honest, because, and this is new. We've talked to other reporters have said in the past, when they get laid off, they get to keep all these kind of things. They get to keep their records. These records don't belong to the organization; they belong to the reporter.
Well, I'm not sure about the ownership of it, but what, if I remember from this particular instance, she was working on something that put the current administration in a horrible light, adding even more to their horrible light. And so I'm pretty sure that if it would have been something, let's say, that exposed the fact that one of these 37,000 cases they have against Trump actually has some factual basis behind it or some legal basis behind it, they would have been all over her, you know, having that to make sure that it got out there somewhere. But because it put the current administration in a really bad light, it's amazing how that happened.
Yeah, it's strange how different things get treated depending upon what side of the political aisle is the subject, I guess. It's not even the person. It's not even the reporter anymore. It's the subject of the reporting that actually matters. It used to be that the reporter was kind of the target, right? If it was a left-wing or right-wing reporter. But now you can be a left-wing reporter, but if you happen to be an honest, honorable reporter and say, hey, I came across this story, it happens to make my side look bad, I've got to report it. You know, I've got the story, I have to report it. You do that, you are now committing heresy. and
That's the next thing that's going to happen, where people are going to be burned at the stake for heresy. I predict that today.
All right. Well, you tell me we've got Richard ready on the field. So let's know what Richard has to say about some social media censorship.
Hi, this is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. The Department of Homeland Security under Biden created the Disinformation Governance Board. It was presumably a way of institutionalizing the social media and other censorship that we now know the Biden administration was engaging in all along. The clamor from those who rightfully feared that their information would be marginalized with a dis, a miss, or a mal label caused the Biden administration to back off. Plus, any action the board took probably would not withstand First Amendment scrutiny. You know, where it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or preventing the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. In Brazil, the Brazilian Supreme Court issued an order on X, formerly Twitter, to block certain popular accounts from the platform. They backed off when X owner Elon Musk pointed out that the edict violated the Brazilian federal constitution. In Belgium, police prevented entry to a venue with over 500 expected attendees and speakers at a national conservatism conference at a hotel in Brussels. Speakers expected to attend included UK Brexit leader Nigel Farage, former UK government Home Secretary Suella Braverman, French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour, and Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. It seems to me that this is a violation of the EU's Article 12, Freedom of Assembly and Association, which reads, and I quote, "Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceable assembly and to freedom of association with others," end quote. It seems like the police excuse for the crackdown was public disturbance. It's clear that the only ones disturbed were the authorities ordering the police action, and of course the police themselves who caused the public disturbance. It's important to note that freedom of speech exists as a fundamental part of civilization and basic human nature. It is not something granted by governments. Our country's and other countries' founding documents do not grant freedom of speech. They prohibit government from violating it. I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives and traditionalists who were most in favor of using censorship to violate freedom of speech and of the press. They were attempting to make pornography and other sins illegal and otherwise impose their values on the whole of society. And they had enough control of government to prevail in many ways. Today, the balance of control of the government has moved to the left. Sin has been redefined as ignoring or actively opposing the government narrative on disease management or controlling the weather. And they are trying to forcibly stop what they perceive as sin from occurring. This isn't really a problem of the left being worse than the right or vice versa. It's about those in power trying to force their view of what society should look like on all members of society. It's about those in power, the elites, if you will, being able to force others to take their advice, whether those others want to or not. It's about the abuse of power. And believe me, if government power exists, it will be abused. After all, it's not the best and brightest who are attracted to government power. It's those who are best at concealing their sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies. We need to be more vigilant about granting the government too much power rather than trying to elect politicians who would force people to take advice we happen to agree with. I'm Richard Fields, and that's this week's Report from the Fields. See you again next week.
Thank you, Richard. You know, the dangers of this social media censorship as we go through farther along the road, there's dangers to it, John, but you know, the market always reacts. We say every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The harder they push, somewhere is going to pop up.
Well, I think what's happening is, you know, X, formerly known as Twitter, is probably the last real bastion for internet freedom. And, you know, Musk, I'm trying to remember whether we're talking about Brazil here or not.
We got it. It's coming. Okay. I think that's last week.
Last week? Okay. You think we did it last week?
We did it last week.
All right. So anyway, it's, but, you know, everybody says, you know, despite the industrial sabotage that these NGOs, which are actually government funded, are doing to try to take down X, formerly known as Twitter, everybody's tweeting like crazy. And, you know, sports people tweet, you know, everybody's talking about their tweets. And I think he's going to end up being kind of the last man standing because of that.
Yeah, we shall. Yeah, we're going to see. Yeah. I know he's got some issues in Brazil he's dealing with at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we're going to move on because talking about Brazil and police states, cops in Brussels, and you know, the
this
EU.
is crazy. The
EU is losing their mind over there. They prevented Nigel Farage, and what was the whole group? I don't remember what it was, right? But anyway,
Nigel Farage, the president of Hungary, another former English prime minister, the guy that was headed up the Brexit thing, some French politicians. Basically, it was the creme de la creme of they call them hard left, but I would just say conservative. Europe was there, and some American voices as well. 500 people. These aren't clowns. This isn't a clown college. These are people who were elected to significant office. You know, people who actually talk about things like fiscal responsibility, but they go, you know, the anti-immigration stuff and all the rest of that. Because somebody supposedly complained that racist slurs were being used or antisocial behavior, something that made them feel scared, the police, with the new rules in EU about, you know, the thought police, wouldn't let people go in. They let people leave, but they wouldn't let them go in. And I think one of the people they wouldn't let go in is a former prime minister of a European country. So, yeah, watch out, world.
Yeah, once they stop allowing people who actually represent, you know, regardless of how many people they represent, whether it's 1%, 10%, 30%, 40%, they have people that they speak for. And if they're not allowed to speak, you are actually creating the very conditions they allegedly are trying to prevent.
Well, they're not. They're alleged. I know a very smart young woman who works as an attorney for the state of California, and I'm just going to leave it there in the description because there's, you know, probably 10,000 attorneys that work for the state of California. And we were talking about this, and it's a government program, and it's certainly not going to do what they say it's designed to do. And she said, no, it's going to do exactly the opposite of what they say it's designed to do, because that's their actual goal. And this was an attorney who works for the state of California. And so, you know, what they're saying is they don't want people's feelings hurt. But what they're doing is preventing anybody who disagrees with them from having a voice.
Yeah, whose feelings matter, because you're going to hurt all these people who don't get to go to this event, have had their feelings hurt.
Yeah.
Right? So you've actually...
Their feelings don't count.
Yeah, their feelings count less than somebody out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the farmers in Europe are revolting. There's a backlash in Poland. Elected kind of a communist president or whatever. He's going to get thrown out in the next election. The unfortunate thing is, because the lefties are going so crazy with the censorship, the hard right is the only thing, and these are people who are anti-immigrants under anything. A lot of them are racist and all the rest. I'm not talking about Conservatives, I'm talking about hard right,
Which is
are the ones that
exactly-
are going to go into power.
Right.
So they're actually going to help, by their hindrance, they're going to help the people they despise the most.
Which was all we could always tell you that's going to happen.
Yeah.
You've left nowhere to go. All right, we've got like 3 minutes, so we're going to run through a couple of these. The Democrats tanked the FISA warrant requirement. So there was
I'm shocked by that.
They were going through the FISA reauthorization, and Republicans wanted to, put in a warrant requirement that if one of these investigations is going to capture an American citizen, you need to get an actual warrant for it. Heaven forbid, you should actually have to follow the Constitution.
Now, think about that. Think about that. The Democrats used to favor civil liberties.
Yeah, but I want to point out, 86 Republicans voted against this amendment as well. So this amendment was to force them to do it. So the nay is, and then Mr. Speaker of the House, Johnson, split the difference. He's the tiebreaker. So Democrats actually don't get the sole blame here.
No.
Republicans could have passed this thing on their own.
Yeah.
They didn't need the help of too many Democrats.
No.
So.
Well, and that's because there are some hard right people in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And they think that, well, the other part of this is I'm wondering if there's one person who is speaking the truth fearlessly, and that is Rand Paul. And I'm wondering if he's lived such a clean life that these secret police organizations, which is basically what our FBI and CIA and NSA now are, don't have any dirt on them, because the rest of these people roll over, and they roll over at the last minute. So, and politicians are corrupt and immoral in general.
Yeah.
So imagine the kind of video they've got of what they've been doing in hotel rooms. So. Pretty easy to just say, look, if you want this all over the, oh, sorry, we went over.
No, we want to get this last one in.
Yeah.
Biden and the Democrats are opposing a bill that would keep the cops and the feds from buying your data. See, because not only do they have all this big spying apparatus, they also just go to Google, Microsoft, and Amazon and just buy the same data.
Yeah.
And so, again, the government, some members of the government, of the legislature, want to prevent that from happening. But Biden, the administration, and the other fellow Democrats say, no, we should be allowed to continue buying this data that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get. And I don't think going around...
they could get it with a warrant if they prove some kind of connection, but since they refuse to prove a connection, they're just fishing for stuff, they can get dirt on people like they did on January 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly, John, it doesn't surprise me that we're
Not
going
at
down
all.
this direction.
Not at all.
And we are running out of time, so I want to thank you for coming with me, John.
Thank you for letting me on the show, man.
I want to thank everybody in there for working hard today. And as always, I want to thank you for watching. And please remember to love everybody and have a good night.
Yeah. Good show. I wish we'd have got that.